Hello, everyone, and welcome to 4TA. That's for the athletes, a platform where we talk about mental health and athletes and bring you exclusive content and interviews. Today, we have a very special guest. This is Trish Bostrom. She is a former professional tennis player. We are so excited to hear from her. So, Trish, could you just give us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I was what you call a pre-Title IX athlete. So I competed athletically before the passing of Title IX, which was June 23rd of 1972. So I just loved tennis and started playing tennis as a child, 7, 8 years old. And when I went to high school, they had a tennis team at my high school, and I did all the exercises, all the sit-ups, all the drills, but they would not let me play because I was a girl.
Oh, wow.
And I remember writing a letter to the head of the Seattle Public Schools, Frank Hensley, saying, here's my record, here's my results, here's my ranking, why don't you let me play? And I want to play because it's called the Chief Sealth Tennis Team. It's not called the Chief Sealth Boys Tennis Team. And he sent me a little letter back saying, sorry, Trish, the team is only for boys. Wow. And then when I went to the University of Washington, they had a women's varsity tennis team. And this was in 1969 to 1971. And we played the Pac-8 just like the men did. However, there were great discrepancies between the programs. They had a great coach. We had a graduate student that knew nothing about tennis. They had uniforms. We had no uniforms. They had scholarships. The men had scholarships. We had no scholarships. The men traveled to the matches. We drove in a car. The men slept in hotels. We would sleep on the floors of friends. Wow. In the particular universities we were playing. So basically the women's programs were not funded. When I was a junior at the university, I continued to complain to my parents about the inequities of this situation.
Rightfully
and
so.
My father fortunately talked to a lawyer, Don Cohen, who said, oh, I'll have Trish come up and see me. So I went up to see Don Cohen and explained the differences between the programs. And he said, Trish, I'll take your case for free. And here was somebody willing to help me challenge the University of Washington to have equitable athletic opportunities for women and the right for me to try out until they were equitable. So it took a long time, even though at the university, but we finally had a pretrial hearing. And at the hearing, the university, at the end of it, one of the vice presidents said, you know, what are you going to do to us? What can you really do to us if we don't do what you're asking? If we don't improve the women's programs, athletic programs, if we don't let you try out, what can you really do to us? And it was then that Don Cohen said, we're going to bring in an injunction against the University of Washington in joining it from competing in any NCAA athletic opportunities, including football. The room went quiet. We heard from the university a week later and said, yes, Trish, you were right, we were wrong. The women's programs are horribly underfunded. We will work towards equitable athletic opportunities for women, and you'll have the right to try out. So then Title IX passed. And so with the Title IX passing, then the universities and the schools were forced to have athletic opportunities for women. It was that time that I graduated early from the University of Washington and went on the international circuit. I played about 8 years from 72 to 80 on the international circuit, competing against players like Billie Jean King, Martina Navratilova, Chris Evert, all of those players. Was able to travel all over the world. We were ranked 5 in the world in doubles and 30 in singles. So it was a fantastic fantastic opportunity to travel around the world and to compete internationally when the circuit was just beginning, was just starting out. It was a tremendous experience.
Wow. So Trish, you hit a huge crossroads. It could have been very easy to bow out and not keep playing, especially with your high school experience. What pushed you to play at the college level, knowing it was going to be a battle?
Yes, you know, I always, I loved tennis from the beginning. And my goal at 7 years old was to play at Wimbledon. So I had these incredibly high goals. And I live in Seattle, Washington, and it rains a lot in Seattle. And so for somebody to have that goal in Seattle where it rains and you can't play tennis all year round, it's very difficult. Right. But that was my goal, was to play. I wanted to play at Wimbledon. I wanted to play internationally. So I think those goals, when I speak to young girls now, or young boys, I always say set high goals. Because if you set high goals, if your goal is to be number one in the world, which all of the players on the international circuit, that's their goal, but then you have a series of secondary goals, to play at the US Open, to play at the French Open, to play at the Australian Open, to travel all over the world playing tennis, to play world team tennis. I never made my number one goal to be number one in the world. Chris Evert was number one. Billie Jean was number one. But because I had that as my main goal, I made all of my secondary goals, each one of them. Right. So that's really, really important. And I think for me, I ran into many roadblocks trying to get on the international circuit, with very little help from the university, with very little help from my high school, with very little help. So I think having those huge goals propelled me to keep trying.
What else kept you mentally strong? I'm sure, like, obviously you went through a lot of difficult experiences, not getting the proper treatment. What were some of your favorite moments, though, thinking back to those experiences, even at in a college level?
Favorite moments of playing tennis?
Just in general, like some highlights, like what kept you going?
Some
I know
highlights.
You had big goals, but just things that
yes. And so one of the highlights was that I won the Pac-8 singles championships, and that has never been won by a University of Washington women player or men player since I did, way back in that was incredible. Like 71. So I won that championship. And when I think back on it, I think, oh, wow, Trish, you won that. And you were probably sleeping on the floor before that match.
Right? Could you imagine?
Because they did not supply housing for the women players, hotels for the women players. And another big opportunity was to go and compete in the women's national championships, the AIAW, which is the precursor to the NCAA for women, was the AIAW, Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. And they had a national championships in Auburn, Alabama. And as a freshman, I qualified for that, but the university would not send me to that championship, even though I qualified. They would send the men, but not the women. And so I went out into the corporate community to raise the funds in order to pay for the airfare to get there. And I remember looking at the draw and it says Patricia Bostrom, University of Washington. And I'm thinking, oh, that should be Patricia Bostrom, Osborne and Newland, because they were the company that helped me get there. But the women athletes in that era, had to think outside the box in order to reach the national collegiates, in order to do something out of the ordinary. When I was bringing the lawsuit against the University of Washington to have equitable athletic opportunities for women, the woman who was in charge of women sports at the University of Washington, women's athletic, Kit Green, brought me into her office and said, Trish, do not do what you're doing. Do not rock the boat. So the women in charge, looking back on it now, they probably could not step out and challenge the system because they were probably worried about losing their jobs.
Right, their well-being.
Whereas we as athletes, we had nothing to lose. I mean, they were not going to eliminate me from the University of Washington as a student because I didn't, because I challenged the university. So I give them a pass, but it sure would have been nice to have their support and say, and I remember walking out of her office thinking, she doesn't understand it. What I am doing will get a better job for her. She doesn't understand it. So that is what the Title IX did. It raised it raised, opened up the opportunities for women, not only in athletics, but it opened up the doors for law school for women, for medical schools, for the computer science classes, for the physics labs, for the chemistry labs. All those that were closed to women were burst right open due to Title IX.
That's incredible.
Do you think all of the fighting that you had to do like throughout all of your athletic career, do you think that kind of led into why you wanted to go into law?
You know, that's a very good question. And law school was always kind of a goal because it was something that women weren't doing. Not many women were going to law school or medical school. So I tend to kind of do things that are challenging and women at that time weren't doing. And so that was I majored in political science, thinking of eventually going to law school.
Okay.
And then I thought, well, I'll try and play professional tennis for 2 years and see how I do, and see if I can earn enough money to pay my air ticket for the next tournament. And then I'll decide whether to go back to law school or not. And I was fortunate because then women's tennis boomed during the 70s. So 1972 to 1980, Billie Jean started World Team Tennis, and I was drafted to play on a professional team. So I played for the Boston Lobsters and then the Indiana Loves.
Oh, wow.
And then Seattle started a team, so I got to play in Seattle for 2 years. And then finally the last team was for the New Orleans Nets in New Orleans. So I was able to play as a professional athlete on the world team tennis teams. So suddenly my 2 years became 8. And then I finally left the circuit and went to law school then.
Wow. That's incredible. So, I mean, going through all the challenges you did, how did that take a toll mentally and emotionally? Just feel like, because you're a trailblazer, obviously it's part of your personality to want to do more and achieve, but it must have taken a toll, like emotionally, to feel like you're constantly fighting. How did that feel for you?
You know, my parents shielded me because I guess there were a lot of negative phone calls that came into the house during this time. And they didn't tell me about those until after the circuit, after.
Okay.
So I was shielded from that. And I think in my situation, I was so focused on my goal, so focused on the goal of taking overloads at the University of Washington, academic overloads at the University of Washington, to make it to the international circuit. And so my goals were really academically to try and get the highest grades that I could get the highest grades you can, and set your sights on the international circuit. So that did not leave time for parties. That did not leave time for all of those, what would you say, normal things at the university level. But I don't regret that because the academic achievement helped me to go to law school, and the athletic achievement has been a tremendous assistance in my career.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. I mean, obviously you have the drive and you're really focused on what you could control, right? And you trained hard physically. So a lot of what we talk about is the mentality side of being successful, right? Do you have any advice or like anything that you went throughout college and further that you would speak to in terms of just mentally how you prepared or what worked and what didn't?
Yes. And, I go back to goal setting because it's so crucial. And I go back, I always tell young people to set a really high goal, an extremely high goal, and then a series of secondary goals. Secondary goals. And then strive for your highest goal. And you may not make your highest goal. You may make it, like me. I may, my highest goal was to be number 1 in the world in tennis. But because I set that high goal, I made all of those secondary goals all of my secondary goals, played all over the world, played all the Grand Slam tournaments, played against Billie Jean, played against Martina, played against Chris Everett Lloyd. So I made all of those goals. So if you set out your high goal and you really focus for that, and these goals can be mental goals, they can be physical goals, and they can be spiritual goals. So I tell people, what is your physical goal for this year? I'm going to exercise 4 times a week. I'm going to swim 4 times a week. What are your goals physically? I'm going to keep my weight under control. I'm going to reduce my blood pressure. What are your physical goals for your body? And then what are your mental goals? How are you going to improve your mind? Are you going to read more books? Are you going to go to lectures? Are you going to join a book club? Are you going to study, take more courses at the university? What are you doing for your goal? And then your spiritual goals. What are you doing for your spiritual life? Are you going to pray more? Are you going to pray for peace in the world? Are you going to pray for peace of the end of the Ukraine and Russian war? What are you going to do to uplift your inside, your spiritual side? And so those goals are, in those areas, I believe, are extremely important, and they will constantly make your mind, your mental state positive. And when you see your mental state going negative, you have to revert it to going positive. Because on the international circuit, in my era, we did not travel with coaches. We did not have the money. There wasn't the money. You were lucky to pay for your own air ticket. You can't pay for a coach also. But the players today have a coach that's constantly telling them, you're doing great. You're doing really well. Mentally, you're doing great. They even travel with sports psychologists who are working on their mental game. And in athletics, it's not only your physical game, but it's your mental attitude too.
Yes.
And in my era, unfortunately, it was yourself. You were your own coach. So you had to train yourself physically and mentally for a match. And if you constantly lost, you don't want to let your mind say, oh, you're no good, you can't do this. So you have to completely be your own mental coach to say, no, uplift your mind. I'm going to hit 100 more serves. My second serve wasn't good in that last match I played. So what am I going to do to improve? I'm going to hit 100 more second serves to get ready for the next match. So we had to be our own physical and mental coaches during that era.
No, I love that you break it up into the physical, mental, and spiritual, because the mind and body are completely connected. And the more you ask of yourself physically, you're asking that much, if not more, of yourself mentally and emotionally. So I love that you picked up on that and were able to do that for yourself.
Yes, that's very right. And that's very correct. And most people forget the spiritual aspect. Most people leave that out. And yet Margaret Court, one of the greatest players in the world, she played before Billie Jean. And the first year I was on the circuit, she was there for 1 year, and I got to watch her play. And she won 64 Grand Slam titles, singles, doubles, and mixed doubles. And after the circuit, then she became a minister. And she said if she had the spiritual development that she has now, she says in her book, she would have won even more Grand Slam tournaments.
Wow.
So I think athletes don't realize that also is a grounding force for you as an athlete. The spiritual side along with the physical and mental side.
I agree completely. You know, it's funny because the higher level athletes, the ones that are at a professional level or just have been very successful, almost always talk about faith and incorporating some kind of spirituality. So I love that you brought that up and gave space to it, because it is grounding. And I feel like it builds such a resilience mentally too, to keep you going.
Yeah, yes, that's very true. And actually the spiritual side will help you as an individual probably the most as you age, age, or as you as you encounter difficulties in your life, whether it's the loss of a family member or loss of a mother or father, it's a spiritual side that you've developed, that you've worked on in your character, that will help you the most through those difficult times.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. Carolyn, what do you think? Do you have any other questions for Trish?
It's weird hearing that, because now that you mentioned that there's been so many people that like all these like high level athletes that talk about like spirituality, like thinking back, like now I'm remembering like a bunch of them do talk about it, but I guess I just never like connected
Made the
it
connection.
before. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's also a mindfulness practice, being able to tune into yourself. And, we get so caught up in this identity as an athlete, having that, I just feel like it's such an important connection. And there's just so much growth to be had there too. I love that point. And I feel like you're only as good as your weakest link. So if you're struggling in a certain area of life, it's going to hold you back from your performance, whether it's as a professional or an athlete or your personal relationships. So, and that's a huge skill, I think, to have on your side.
Yes, and I like what you said. You're only as good as your weakest link.
Yeah.
That's very good, because when we were playing on the international circuit, you had to evaluate. If I lost, I had to evaluate myself. Why did I lose? What was, and basically what you're saying, what was my weakest link in that match? And if you can improve the weakest link, then you improve your entire game and your entire character as person.
Yeah, then you're golden. I love that. So Trish, you've had some fantastic insights, and I love just the experience that you have and the energy you bring to the table. I love that you talked about the specific goals and attending to the different areas of the goals, being very purpose and focus driven. Do you have any more tips or anything you'd tell your past self or current college athletes that are kind of in the midst of it that might be struggling?
The present college athletes, they have so much. I want to tell them, this is a time of your life to give 150%, because you have a great coach, you have uniforms, you have scholarships, you have training tables, you have everything. You sleep in hotel beds, you fly to your matches. The athletes of today don't realize, they take for granted what they have. And that's why the athletes of today, I also tell them, always support Title IX. Don't let Title IX die. If you see it being eroded, and people will try to eliminate Title IX because it's such a great legislation for women, but there'll always be attacks on Title IX. So the current athletes need to be vigilant to uphold Title IX. So I'd say to the current athletes, be grateful, be really grateful for what you have. And also, this is a time of your life to give 150% to it, because what you will give now in your athletic achievement in college will benefit you throughout your entire life. I walk down the streets of Seattle, and I'm still known more for what I did in tennis than anything else. People still recognize me and acknowledge me as a Wimbledon player, as what I did in athletics. So more so than law. So what I'm saying is, it's so important. And employers, they will look at your resume, and when they see that you played Division I, or Division II, or Division III, that you were an athlete, that you worked hard, that you were an athlete, that is a big thing, huge thing for employers.
Absolutely.
So the time you're putting in now, and I know it's difficult because you're having to study and you're also having to work out and you're having to compete. It's difficult, but it all will be worth it for you throughout your life. I can guarantee you that. I can guarantee you that it will be worth it for you. So this is the time to be mentally strong, be physically strong, be spiritually strong, and do the best that you can do.
That is such a beautiful perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Because that's such a good point. Is you don't realize how far things have come, and for someone like you
Yes.
to be able to say, "Hey, look what you have." That's just such a different perspective. Um, I love that, and just being able to embrace the moment. Something I say to the players that I consult with the performance work that I do is the verb is play, and it is meant to be enjoyable. It's something you're supposed to love and enjoy. And it's not always easy to do that, but I love your perspective and just having gratitude and being able to acknowledge the opportunity and what you do have. Yeah.
It is
And it's
crazy 'cause-
incredible the opportunity that these young women have.
Mhm.
And I'm a firm believer, in fact, I know it, that athletics creates leadership qualities.
Yes.
And so
for sure.
these young women, you're going to be leaders in our society, in all aspects of our society, in corporations, as lawyers, as doctors, as ministers, in computer scientists, in all areas of our society. You, the athletes, you have the character and the discipline and the goal setting ability. It's already proven you've done that. And that you will carry that on to be athletic, to be leaders in our society. And our society today we need all of the women leaders, because women have a different perspective on how to solve problems. They bring something new to the table. They bring something new to the corporate table. So, and the political table, they solve problems differently. So it's so important. Your athletic training is so important, and you will be leaders in our society in the coming years.
It goes so far beyond a number or a game or a title. It really does. I love that.
Yes,
I think it was
yes, it goes
like-
far beyond that. It's deeper than that. It's larger than that.
Yeah.
What the young athletes are learning in their athletic training will assist them in whatever they do, in whatever job they do. And it's going to definitely help solve our country's problems.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I graduated college less than a year ago, and being in it, like in the moment, it was really easy to be like, this is so unfair because like the men's lacrosse team has like triple the amount of fans that we do. Same with soccer, same with like basketball, same with every single sport. And it's like, oh my God, like, of course the boys have more viewers, like whatever. But then hearing your story is like super humbling kind of to be like, all right, at least we both got like travel buses. We both got like practice gear, whatever. It's crazy.
But Carolyn, what you say is good, is right, because if it's still inequitable, which in some areas it still is, even with Title IX,
Right.
the women athletes have to speak up.
To strive.
Just like, when was it? It was the National Basketball Championships, and they gave the men this beautiful workout room, the women, 2 machines. And then a young athlete took a video, a woman athlete took a video of the 2 areas, and that video went viral. And because of that video, the NCAA, shame on the NCAA for doing that, but they then changed and made a great exercise area for the women. But I was amazed that the NCAA here in in the 21st century, they were still not having equitable opportunities for women, not having an equitable workout room for women. So it's still areas are still inequitable. It's 150% better than when I played. But the present women athletes have to be vigilant now to say, hey, this isn't right, this isn't equitable, just like the young woman athlete did by taking the video of the exercise equipment.
Absolutely. Wow. Trish, you've just been a wealth of knowledge and perspective. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share? We're so grateful to have had the opportunity to speak with you. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up tonight?
Oh, I would just say to the women athletes, go for it. Billie Jean King used to say that, go for it. Go for it. Dream big. Ruth Bader Ginsburg also said, dream big to the young, dream to the young girls, dream big, work hard for your dreams, and they'll happen. So with those quotes from Billie Jean and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I really encourage all the women athletes to keep trying hard and keep working hard, be mentally strong, be physically strong, spiritually strong, and really go for it.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Trish.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you're very welcome. Carolyn, this was fun.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Take care and we'll talk soon.